1-800-259-9231. Tony, Mike, Andrew, Jeremy, Pat, your calls are coming up momentarily. Again, Dr. Blaylock, we could have you back up in the next few weeks for another full show just on the health care plan. But I go back to this. I've read the same subsections you're reading. My dad's a physician, so growing up, I know enough about how health care works. He's also been a medical care consultant to both hospitals and dental offices, so I can specifically read this and understand a lot of it. But I've seen what the experts have said as well, and I've read it. It's very clear. This is a total takeover of 20% of our economy, and the lying about it. But you were getting into the death panels. I mean, it's Daschle. It's Rahm Emanuel's brother. It's the publications. At first, a few months ago, when they thought they had it, they were saying, yeah, you don't need these unnecessary tests. And I've watched House of Commons back when Tony Blair was in, admitting people were waiting 16, 18 months for brain surgeries that were 95% successful if you got it within 2 months, but if you didn't, you were dead. And they admitted this. I mean, I've got two people that work for me in England, the Watson brothers. Their healthcare system's a nightmare. And they now are saying, if you've had a bad life or you've smoked or you've done this, we're not going to give you the health care. So I keep going back to the lying when they attacked Sarah Palin, who, by the way, I don't like Sarah Palin. She was a fool to quit the governorship. You know, they put her in there as a ringer. But my point is, she's right. But instead they just say, oh, she's a liar. She's a dumb woman. She's an idiot. There's no death panels. When these bioethicist boards, I mean, these are death panels. Dr. Blaylock.
Well, you see, they're clever not using the term death panels or end-of-life death panels or anything like that. What they do is they leave it open-ended. For instance, they talk about end-of-life services and support, palliative and hospice. Well, if you know about hospice, what they did to them is you're allowed to, or you're supposed to transfer a patient to hospice if you think they'll die in 6 months. But physicians don't always know when someone would die, so some live a year or 2 years. Well, you have to take care of them and comfort them and give them their medication. Well, the government came in and said anybody living over 6 months will cut off all Medicare payments to, so you're going to be stuck with the cost. Well, the hospice program said, well, we can't assume this cost, so they started injecting the patients with morphine, so they would die within 6 months. And so the government policy pushed the hospice system to start ending patients' lives sooner than they would normally.
And now they're killing people in Europe. Even Newsweek admits this, but says it's beautiful and wonderful. I showed the article a few weeks ago. They're now killing people who are depressed, and the government will pay for that. But I know I interrupted you before you finished your full story along those whole lines, so go ahead.
Well, in the bill itself, it talks about, they say, well, it's not mandatory you have this counseling every 5 years. Well, that's a lie. Page 424, it says that this is a part of routine medical care, and the individuals will have the consultations every 5 years, and that if they develop a change in their medical condition, that is an injury or anything that could potentially be life-ending, which is virtually anything, that the consultations will occur more often, and they'll be updated. It also says that you will be referred to special national, state, and community-based organizations who will do the counseling. Well, that includes ACORN.
Exactly. So this is total political indoctrination, and the horror stories of hospice, and it's different facilities are different, but the Wall Street Journal with Wesley Smith had a whole series of articles about people in government custody who were paralyzed neck down, begging for food and water and being killed.
Well, yeah, and of course this is what happens in England. In England, for instance, one of the government studies on the quality of the National Health Service found that in one city, 400 to 1,200 people died from what they described as appalling health care. That's just one city, 400 to 1,200 in a year. Now, you multiply that times the 60 million people in England, you're talking about 10,000, 20,000 or more people dying every year from appalling care. There's even stories of patients starving to death in hospital wards. And I had a friend of mine who lives in Louisiana, and he told me the story of one of his close friends whose daughter was a medical received any medication. She was progressively getting worse and was afraid she was going to die. She called home to her mother. Her mother flew to England, picked her up, flew her back home to Louisiana, and had an ambulance carried to the hospital. Now, that's how they treat the medical students. For 6 days, she wasn't even seen by a physician. She could have died.
Well, I mean, I watched the House of Commons, and for all you dumb, stupid, ignorant, gullible people out there who are watching this or listening who believe all these lies about how you're going to get free health care, the moon is not made of cheese and you're not getting free health care. And the government is working for big banks that want a new tax to pay off these tens of trillions they've stolen, and they're just going to grab the health care, tax you, keep the money, and then give you an aspirin for a heart attack like they do in these other socialist countries. So you better figure that out. I want to go to calls, Dr. Blaylock, but have you, after we take some, hit some more of what's going on in the health care plan. But Rahm Emanuel's brother, who's now in the White House advising, remember last week he said doctors shouldn't be so obsessed over their Hippocratic oath to do no harm from Hippocrates. And for the last decade, they haven't given the Hippocratic oath. I mean, they really are taking our doctors and nurses and taking them from being great, upstanding people, guardians of human dignity, and turning them into little Nazi ghouls. Can you speak to the Hippocratic oath and Emanuel's brother having the nerve to say, well, you shouldn't take it serious?
Well, the basis of the Hippocratic Oath was Hippocrates, and that was teaching physicians that you're to do everything you can for your patient, and you're never to take a life. Well, that, of course, was an attack on abortion, and so the left wing didn't like that at all. For physicians were not supposed to take lives. It also included euthanasia, meaning you're never to kill someone because you think they're a useless life. Well, they didn't like that either. So we have at least two things that was getting under the skin of the left: that's abortion and euthanasia. So they want the oath to be removed. Well, now with Ezekiel Emanuel, who's a physician, saying that this oath should be abandoned, and physicians are just too obsessed with the idea of saving lives, and we need to start letting these people go. They're just wasted effort, that they have no social utility. And, of course, that would also include all disabled people, because according to this lexicon, disabled people have no social utility. They have no purpose, and they're a drain on the economy. Therefore, we should just let them die. It even says in the Hastings Center that it has been a crazy idea to give dialysis to people because some are living 20 years on dialysis, and that we could have just let them go at the time that they developed renal failure. And they even, in one of the articles, said we should turn back to clock on medicine. And instead of practicing high-technology medicine we have today, we should turn it back to the 1960s level and have that as our health care.
Doctor, is there any doubt in your incredibly deep breadth of research that these are eugenicists and we have a eugenics guild running our modern society, and that at the core, it's just a rationale to be sadistic control freaks who are on power trips? I mean, most of these high-level people, they don't even think they're doing good. These are really dark people.
Well, yeah, I think it's a mixed group. I think there's some who, in their perverted way of thinking, think it's good. Some are just evil people from the core. But, if you read their literature, they really think this is something that's beneficial to society, is to get rid of what they call the human weeds. They said you weed a garden and get rid of the weeds. Well, that's what we have to do in society. It's filled with all these unfit, these people who don't deserve life, and we should weed them out by whatever methods we can. And they said, well, we know this public won't accept extermination camps, but if we could just deny them health care, they'll die off on their own.
And that's what Margaret Sanger, of course, said. You're repeating her, and then that's repeated. But really, the test of humanity is people that are more intelligent, stronger. We're meant to lift up the weak. At the moment we delve into this, we let pure wickedness out of the bottle and societies collapse.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you start reading what some of the so-called elite write, it's quite frightening. And like I said, the stage was set for Adolf Hitler in the 1900s, the 1800s. People were writing things that he eventually implemented. Same thing with Lenin and Stalin and Mao Zedong. There were people who wrote quite eloquent papers about controlling society and exterminating mass numbers of people.